guys, I figured we're long overdue for a progress update on this thing. So it's been a while. A lot's been done. If you haven't seen the last video, you should check that out. Link will be up here somewhere. You can check that out to see what we've done so far on this and how much farther we've got to go. This video I'm going to cover everything I did from last spring when I made my last video up through until when I parked it last fall. So finally got it dug out, getting ready to work on it again this year. And yeah, so make sure you hit the subscribe button and ring the bell so you can stay up to date on videos anytime I post to keep up with the progress on this thing. And if you want to see progress as it's made, I'll have the link to my Instagram account down in the description. I post there almost any time that I'm doing anything on this Jeep. So buckle up, hang on for the ride. I think I'm going to get down. Probably not a very good idea to be sitting up here since I don't have any floor below me. Once the engine, transmission, and axles were pulled, work started on the frame. Upon closer inspection, the original frame turned out to be bent pretty bad, and the front horns were replaced pretty poorly with box tubing. The plow mounts were welded on, and they were going to be a pain to have to remove fully, so I decided to source a new frame. Now, a friend of mine was generous enough to give me a good condition 1971 frame that he had sitting beside his shop. Had nearly zero rust, most of its original paint left. So I cleaned it up with wire wheels and brushes, and then sprayed some Rust-Oleum primer and hit it with a heavy coat of Axalta Imron just brushed on. And then with that done, I could start reassembling things. I painted the axles with the Imron as well, reinstalled them with a Rough Country 2.5-inch lift, and I replaced the spring plates with Warrior Products U-bolt skid plates. And then I turned to the brakes. New wheel cylinders, drums, shoes. Hardware was already in good shape, so I just cleaned it up and reused it. Made all new hard lines with Nycop line. Bought custom braided stainless drop hoses from Brake Hoses Unlimited on eBay. Master cylinder still makes good pressure, so I just left it for now. I installed a new brake light switch, and that part was done. So as of now, the axles still need to come back out of the chassis and come apart for new bearings and seals and whatnot. And while I'm in there, I'm going to swap out these factory 373s for some 488s, give her a little bit, lower crawl ratio, help keep the tire speed down and whatnot, make it a little bit easier to control on the rocks, and especially where it doesn't have a whole lot of horsepower. And first gear in the transmission's not super low. Low range in the transfer case isn't super low. Plus I'm going with, I think, a 33-inch tire. So anything I can help in the overall gearing department. I'm also going to install an aux cable actuated locker in the rear axle. Still kind of undecided whether or not I'm going to put a locker in the front end. From what I've been seeing, the only option is an auto locker, and no, not interested, I don't think. I mean, even with the lockout hubs, I think I'm going to pass on that. Maybe do a Dana 30 conversion at some point in the future. I still got to get this thing to run and drive first. I'll worry about all that stuff down the road. So next my focus turned to the rest of the drivetrain. I opened up the transfer case, checked everything out, and it looked good, so it just got new seals and reassembled. Now, if you saw the last video, you know there were some issues with the way that it mounted. This tab over here has about half of it missing that was broke off. So I just drilled the threads out of the transmission and used a couple of washers with a nut and bolt and a lock washer to hold it together. If it doesn't hold up, oh well, I'll just replace the transfer case. I'm not really crazy about the condition of the case itself. And then this tab over here had a bunch of weld down in here where it was welded back on that wouldn't allow you to tighten the bolt all the way because you couldn't even get a wrench on it. So I just took a carbide deburring bit, kind of walked it back and forth down in there for a little while, got it kind of profiled back down to where it's supposed to be, so now you can get a wrench on it and tighten it up properly. So that took care of that, and then it was onto the old T14 here. Now this shifter had a lot of rotational play, and what I mean is when you try to rock it side to side to go from like first up to second, you couldn't rock it side to side because the shifter was actually rotating this way. So I had to open all that up and see what the problem was there. So as expected, the guide slot in the pivot ball was shot. So I just built up both sides with weld
and then followed the weld back down to the original profile.
Now, there's still just a little bit of play that's caused by this pin right here. That's what rides inside of that groove that I had to weld up. And that pin is supposed to be round. Well, at this point it looks more, you know, like Darlington Raceway or Bristol Raceway. So, in the future that might need some work, but I mean for now, you can go from first right to second, no problem at all. You can actually do what you need to do. So, I'm calling that a win. I opted to send the trans out for a rebuild by a professional just because I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing on half of this stuff, but I mean, transmission's kind of important. I've never been into an automotive transmission. My extent with transmission experience is lawnmowers, so I bought the input and output bearings, small parts kit, seal kit, sent it off to a guy at my dad's work. Well, he got back to me, said he tore it apart. Turns out the first reverse synchronizer was toast. I mean, roasted. So I had to order one of those, but it came in the mail fairly quickly and I got it over to him. He finished it up, brought it home, and all that was left was paint and reinstallation. So the biggest project so far was this little guy right here, the old Dauntless. First I stripped it down to nothing but a bare block. Took the pressure washer to it, cleaned everything out, made sure I flushed out all the oil and coolant passages in the block and the heads, and boy were they nasty. Just years of sludge and rust and who knows what else.
So with everything cleaned up, it was time for inspection. The wear on the rotating assembly and cylinder walls was minimal, so to keep the budget low, I made the decision to avoid machine work and just give it a quick and dirty refresh. So I started off, cleaned everything up with a wire wheel and wire brush, and then I painted all of the engine components with Duplicolor Ford Green engine enamel, which was the closest I could find to the original Dauntless Green in a rattle can, just going by photos. The cylinders received a quick honing, and the crankshaft was reinstalled with the original bearings. The pistons received new rings from Sealed Power and were reinstalled using the original rod bearings. The oil pump was rebuilt with a kit from Melling, and new neoprene front and rear main seals from National were installed. All other gaskets and seals were replaced with a kit from Felpro. The heads were cleaned up, valves were lapped with new valve stem seals installed. I plugged the smog ports in the heads with stainless steel socket head plugs, thread sealed with Permatex Ultra Copper. The heat riser ports on the intake manifold were plugged as well using a pair of 13/32 expansion plugs from Dorman. I cleaned the carbon from their holes with a drill bit. Then the plugs were driven in using some more Ultra Copper to help seal them. A restored carburetor was sourced from I-5 Components in California through their eBay store, as the original carb was in pieces in pretty bad condition overall. I installed a Comp 252 cam and comp lifters and new Elgin push rods. A Cloy's timing set completed the rotating assembly. New water pump from Flow Cooler, and to finish out the valve covers, I coated the plug wire holders in Plastidip. Now once the oil pump has been primed, I will install the new DUI HEI conversion distributor and their live wire plug wires. I'll be running Autolite Platinum plugs in this Jeep, just as I did in my old Wrangler, so I've always gotten good results with Autolite. The flywheel was resurfaced locally, and with the new clutch installed, I was ready to reinstall the transmission and set the power plant back in the frame.
So I replaced the engine, transmission, and transfer case mounts, and with all that, I was ready to mate the transfer case back to the transmission. And to go along with the new clutch, I also replaced the clutch cable, clutch return spring, and the clutch adjuster.
So to finish out the work last fall, I set the tub back on the frame with the hood and the grill, rolled it out in the lean-to, and put a cover over it for winter.
So obviously there's still a long way to go on this project. And as you can see, I still haven't even started on the tub yet. And I'm sure I'll be most of this year doing just that. I'm still not 100% sure how I'm going to attack this tub, considering it needs, well, everything. But buying a full reproduction tub is absolutely out of the question. It's way too much money, and from what I've read and reviews on them, they really don't fit all that well without, you know, some work. And if I'm going to have to rework stuff to make panels fit right, I'd rather do it while they're separate panels and there's more adjustments that can be done versus having to try to adjust things on full tubs. Fiberglass also out of the question. Personally, not a fan of fiberglass. You know, I know how to work with steel. I don't have a clue how to work with fiberglass. You know, this thing's ultimately going to be an off-road Jeep. If I take it out in the trail and I whack it hard into a rock, I want to be able to knock a dent back out. I don't want to have to fix a crack in fiberglass. Granted, fiberglass tubs are rugged, and I've seen them take some abuse, but for me personally, it's just not an option. I think what I'm going to do to start with is just strip this tub down into all of its individual panels, and then from there decide what can be straightened and patched and fixed and modified, and what I'll be capable of fabricating myself, and then from there, whatever's left over, I'll probably just end up buying aftermarket replacements and essentially build myself a brand new tub out of mostly new parts and some parts salvaged from this tub. So we'll see. Now the biggest thing to remember is that this is not a restoration. I don't do that. I don't have the money for that. I don't have the skills for that. I don't have the garage space, and I don't have the time for that, quite frankly. You know, the goal with this Jeep is just to take a Jeep that most people would have sent to the scrapyard and get it back on the road and back on the trails where it belongs, but to do it as affordably as possible while also addressing all of the issues and making sure that when it goes back together, everything that should be new is new, so it's gonna, you know, be a fun toy for years to come. So as of right now, I do have one hiccup on the engine I didn't notice until now. At some point, somebody apparently replaced the timing cover on it. It's not right. It's missing the port for the thermostat bypass hose to plug into. I'm going to be buying a new one, getting that put on just as soon as I can. I've still got a lot of little stuff I got to buy for the engine. I've got some here now. As of right now, the goal is to hear it run before my birthday, which is April 26th. It's April 2nd now. We'll see. I'd really like to be able to get this thing to a point where I can at least drive it around the yard this fall before it gets put away again for winter. So hey, if you liked this video, give it a thumbs up. If you disliked it, give it a thumbs down. Simple as that. But I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're following along with the progress, and if you want to stay up to date, remember to hit that subscribe button. As for me, I think I'm going to have me a cold snack and make pretend I'm driving this thing. See you around.